Well, let's get the view of Labour now this morning. Joining me here in the studio is the Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reid. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. We've heard today from the Prime Minister that he's announcing that Border Force officials are going to be stationed in Egypt to help evacuate British citizens who are there. Do you think the government is doing enough to get Britons out of Gaza?
Well, I think it's very important that we get, as Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, has called for, a humanitarian pause so that foreign nationals who are trapped in Gaza can be got out. And around 100, I understand it, UK nationals who are in there. And it's very important that the UK government must focus on getting those people out. But beyond that, the other thing a humanitarian pause can give us is the ability to get aid in to those people living in Gaza, innocent Palestinian citizens, nothing to do with Hamas and the terrorism that they're responsible for. But they need help too. Food, water, medicine, fuel. We need to get the electricity switched on for the hospitals. They've only got a day's or so's worth of power left, and there's a need to be able to help people who are getting hurt in that situation. So a humanitarian pause, both to get our citizens out, which is a priority, of course it is, but also to make sure that we can get much more aid in to help Palestinians.
What's the difference between this humanitarian pause that you're calling for and a ceasefire?
Well, a ceasefire would be permanent, and a humanitarian pause is to allow the aid to go in now. And of course, nobody watching these scenes, we've seen them just now, on our screens, can feel anything other than absolute pain at what is going on. It's horrific to see what's going on. But Israel, we have to remember, was subject to a vicious terrorist attack, the worst attack on Israel in its entire history, the worst slaughter of Jewish people since the Holocaust. Israel has the right to defend itself and to protect its citizens. Israel will want to, understandably, dismantle the terrorist infrastructure and network that allowed that slaughter to take place. Otherwise, it will happen again. Now, because of what Hamas have done, they've stored their weapons, they've put their terrorist fighters in densely populated areas, underneath schools, underneath hospitals, and they've done that not because they care about Palestinian lives, but because they don't care at all. Israel has to go into this very volatile situation and make sure that network, that capability is dismantled so it can't happen again. Longer term, once we get through this crisis, there needs to be focus from the entire international community on negotiating a settlement to what has been going on between Palestine and Israel, so we get a secure Israel and a secure Palestine, and the end for in going forwards to these kind of hostilities.
So you've explained there why Labour is calling for a pause in fighting rather than a ceasefire, and yet not everyone is happy in your party about that, are they? In fact, a frontbench colleague of yours, Imran Hussain, has broken ranks to sign a Commons petition calling for a ceasefire. Do you think more will follow suit?
Do you know, I completely understand and empathise with colleagues who are seeing what's going on in Gaza and just feeling desperate. How so many viewers will be looking at those scenes today and feel just anguish at the pain and suffering that is going on. But what I would say to colleagues is, if this attack that Israel suffered had been on the UK, if it had been on the US, our state, the United States and our state, would have sought to defend ourselves, to protect our citizens by dismantling the capability of the terrorist organisation that carried it out. That applies to Israel too. They have the right under international law to do that. But in taking that work, they must continue to follow international law as they carry it out. But long term, the only solution to this crisis is not going to be military. It can only be negotiated politically, and we need the whole international community to focus on it much more than has been the case over recent decades.
OK, but I want to get a sense of how much agreement there is within Labour on this. I mean, for example, it's lost its majority on Oxford City Council after a 9th councillor resigned over Keir Starmer's stance, where he won't call for a ceasefire, he'll go for this humanitarian pause. Are we going to see an electoral impact of this position, do you think?
Well, I think we won't, because, and the reason I think that is that in politics you should do the right thing, not the electorally expedient thing. And what Keir has been clear about all the way through is that Israel has a right under international law to protect its citizens. Of course it does, any state has that. But Israel must also carry out its actions in line with international law. And Keir has made that clear in every single interview that he's given. I understand the anguish and the anger of my colleagues and many of my constituents, if I'm honest as well, looking at what is going on in Gaza and feeling anguish and pain. But we have to understand Israel, like any other state that has been subject to that kind of terrorist attack, has the right and will want to dismantle the infrastructure that caused it so it cannot happen again. But in doing that, it must obey international law. And right now, there's a need for a humanitarian pause to get aid into Palestinians who need it and to get foreign nationals, including around 100 UK citizens, out.
How concerned is Labour about tensions rising in this country, and to what extent are you getting advice about security?
Well, I mean, we're all really worried about, we've seen already from the statistics, an increase in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in different parts of the country. I think it's very important that all politicians right now are out there reaching out to those communities, our synagogues and our mosques, and making sure that they feel connected, they're able to express their views. We can understand their security concerns and we can convey that to these police and other emergency services to make sure that people feel safe. It's a tragedy that when you get a situation in another part of the world, it does sometimes result in growing tensions in communities here. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to do everything that we can to allay those tensions. You asked about the security situation for MPs and other elected representatives. Of course, we're concerned about that, but we get advice and guidance from the police and we will follow that. But my priorities right now are making sure that tensions in the communities we represent are dealt with and managed, and everyone feels supported. Nobody should feel afraid in this country simply because of who they are or the faith that they follow.
OK, well, Steve Reid, we appreciate